name is Christina Tobin. I am the president and founder of the Free and Equal Elections Foundation. I want to first of all thank you very much to the University of Connecticut for allowing us to hold this debate here tonight. I also would like to reach out or say thank you to the Idealists United as well. We are holding a U.S. Senate debate between John Mertens of the Connecticut for Lieberman Party and Warren Mosler of the Independent Party. So I would like to start with the format for this debate tonight. It will be a cumulative format. There will be a 2-minute introduction, a 2-minute closing. There will be 5 questions in total. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond. Throughout the debate, each candidate will also have 5 opportunities total to take 1 more minute after each candidate has answered a question to offer a rebuttal or exchange upon their previous answer. For some example, you can use your extra minute on on each of these 3 questions, or you can choose to say your extra minutes for the last 3 questions. This promotes an open exchange of ideas and thoughts. So I'd like to introduce our first candidate for U.S. Senate here in Connecticut, Warren Mosler of the Independent Party. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My first proposal is to promote honesty in government. That is that all candidates should be sworn in, so I'll take the I solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. Now, anything I say that isn't true is a lie and is perjury. It can be prosecuted in a court of law, not just campaign promises broken. So I guess I have to introduce myself here. My name is Warren Mosler. I'm the Independent Party candidate for the U.S. Senate. I was born in Manchester, Connecticut. I went to Manchester High School, class of '67. UConn, class of 1971. I got a BA in economics. From there, I went to the Savings Bank of Manchester. My first job in the financial sector. From Savings Bank of Manchester, I went to Bache in Hartford, and then in 1976, I went off to New York to my first Wall Street job at Bankers Trust, where I was involved in derivatives trading and sales of Ginnie Mae securities. Bankers Trust, I got hired by one of my clients, William Blair and Company in Chicago, where I started their fixed income arbitrage department. I've been what you call a money trader for a long time. I started my own fund with Blair in 1982. Moved it to Florida in 1984. And turned it over to my partners in 1987 after a 15-year track record. We had the highest risk-adjusted returns of any manager in the world at the time. I'm not sure anyone's done better. We had no losing trades for 15 years and only 1 down month on a 1/10 of a percent on the market. And a risk-adjusted alpha return of about 6%, and the highest risk-adjusted returns of any manager. I turned it over to my partners in the end of 1997. I took about 12%, and now I moved my company about 7 years ago, to the U.S. Virgin Islands on an employment program, where they give you a tax advantage for, in the U.S. Virgin Islands is a U.S. territory, U.S. citizens, U.S. passports. They give you a lower tax rate in return for moving your company down there and employing people. And it hasn't been a successful program. Only a few of us moved down there, so I guess the market would tell us the incentive is large enough to bring people down there. I'm running for the U.S. Senate strictly as a matter of conscience to fix this very, very broken economy. I wouldn't be running otherwise. And the reason I'm doing this is because I have an understanding of the monetary system. I'm what you call an insider in monetary operations. I visit the Fed regularly, and I've been doing money arbitrage for a long time. And I know that no one in Congress understands monetary operations. They don't understand banking. And they've allowed a financial crisis to spill over into a real recession, put millions and millions of people out of work. It's entirely unnecessary. For the rest of this discussion, I'll be reviewing what we can do to end this, to get America back to work, to create the 20 million jobs we need. My first proposal, hear more of, is a full payroll tax holiday, where the federal government simply stops taking FICA taxes out of people's paychecks who are working for a living.
I'll leave the time card right there for 2 minutes for opening.
Okay. I feel like I run over. Yeah. Okay. Under this proposal, everyone working for a living will see their pay, just as For example, someone earning $50,000 a year will see their take-home pay go up by over $300 a month. The average Connecticut family will see their take-home pay go up by over $600 a month, which will immediately restore sales and then jobs. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Mertens. I'm a professor of engineering at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut. I also teach public policy and environmental science. I'm on the third ballot line in Connecticut U.S. Senate, running against Linda Mann, Dick Blumenthal, and Warren Mosler. I'm here to talk about the need for nonpartisan problem solving in government. The two-party system is broken. The average Republican senator could pass the average Democratic senator on the street, and they wouldn't even recognize each other, according to pundit Mark Shields on the NewsHour. The system has gotten so bad that either party talks to each other, and they're afraid to give each other any credit for any good ideas, so nothing gets done. Our biggest problem right now is creating jobs and fixing our economy in the short term. You can read my detailed plan to do that on my website. But there are many other huge problems that none of the candidates are talking about. I'm talking about protecting us from another mortgage crisis and dealing with the too big to fail banks, enabling entrepreneurism and small business investment to grow our economy in the longer term, implementing intelligent and honest policy in Afghanistan, and bringing our troops home from the Middle East, rebuilding our cities, implementing a forward-looking education system, implementing a comprehensive and well-articulated national energy policy for the first time in our history, ending corporate ownership of our government, and ending corporate control of our tax structure. We need to simplify our ridiculously complicated tax system and address tax fairness. Dealing with immigration in an honest and humane way, implementing intelligent drug law reform, and addressing issues of social justice, just to name a few. I present over 30 detailed position statements on my website, mertens2010.com. It's time to have leaders that inspire us to make this country better instead of tearing it apart and throwing mud at each other. There's a lot of really wonderful people in the world out there doing a lot of really wonderful things, but unfortunately none of them seem to go into politics anymore. And we're here to change that. I'm on the ballot for the Connecticut for Lieberman party. We took that party over. It's no longer for Lieberman. We turned it into an anti-war, anti-corruption party that stands for problem solving in government. And I urge you to go to all four candidates' websites, read what we each have to say, and vote for the best candidate. And I look forward to an honest conversation with Warren today. And I wish Linda McMahon and Dick Blumenthal were here, and I wish they had invited others to an open and honest discussion in their other debates. I don't know if you saw any of them, but I think they were the best things that happened to Warren in my campaign because they turned a lot of people off to each of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mosler and Mr. Mertens, for your warm introductions. I'd like to start with the first of 5 questions tonight. Questions of substance, might I add. We're going to jump right into it. Many states with medical marijuana programs experience difficulties due to interference from the federal government. Would you support federal legislation that would allow states to set their own policies regarding the medical use of marijuana? John Mertens?
Oh, yeah, that's right. Sorry, I forgot. When we're answering questions, we're going to do it standing up here. That's a small part of a very big issue. I do support Prop 19 in California. I actually grew up in California. I grew up on a farm in Northern California. I won't talk about that. So I have a lot of relatives still in California. And the medical marijuana situation in California is kind of a mess. I think it would be much better off if it were legal, controlled, and taxed. But it's part of a much bigger issue, which is our drug law policy in general in the United States. 3% of our population is in the criminal justice system. This is one of our biggest problems. 3%. That's 7 times the rate of Canada and 5 times the rate of any other developed country. It's the highest rate of any country in the world, higher than Russia. And it's largely because of our drug laws. Like 70% of our prison population are Black and Hispanic. So it's also racially unfair. It's an issue of social justice. It doesn't make sense to put addicts in prison. They should be treated, and drugs should be distributed by the state in a controlled and medicalized way instead of controlled and distributed by criminals. We also shouldn't put people in prison who are living in poverty, who feel that their only way to make money is to sell drugs. We need a program to repair our cities, which I have on my website, called a 21st Century Marshall Plan. And I'm not the only one who feels this way. I've had people, I had an interview yesterday with a newspaper reporter who said, oh, that makes you a liberal. I hate the terms liberal and conservative. This does not make you a liberal. In fact, the best book I've ever read about this was called Ending the War on Drugs, written by a conservative Republican named Dirk Chase Eldridge, who campaigned for Ronald Reagan. This is not a liberal, conservative issue. This is a harm reduction issue, and it's common sense. I have to stop now.
Thank you. Mr. Martins? Mr. Mo?
I'll have to agree with John on this issue. I don't think that marijuana should be a police matter. If we've got a problem with it, it should be handled through social agencies, churches, families, but I see no reason for it to be a police matter. You know, the last time we had criminals with machine guns causing problems was during Prohibition. We're getting the same thing now. We've got 6,000 bodies a year piling up on the Mexican border over this. Okay, that's far more than we've lost in any wars. We've got, it's not just marijuana, it's drugs as well. We've got people, for example, in Afghanistan, we've got the problem of drugs financing the people who are shooting at us. They're selling the drugs to the United States, getting the money to shoot at us. Makes no sense at all. So I'll be brief here. I just see no reason this should be a police matter, and marijuana should be legalized. That answers your question.
I will move on to question number 2. Ned Lamont and Rob Simmons recently criticized Linda McMahon and Richard Blumenthal in a Hartford Courant editorial entitled, "Where are McMahon, Blumenthal on wars, security? What are your positions on the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and other security issues?" Mr. Mosler.
Thank you. My positions are generally that we shouldn't be there and we shouldn't be doing what we're doing there for the most part. Now, it's not that we don't have a role over there, it's certainly not, but it is now. And for example, let me look at Iraq. When we first went into Iraq, I thought, okay, and this is the way I always look at something, what's the best case that could happen in Iraq? The best case was that we'd go in, we'd have shock and awe, Saddam Hussein would get killed, and then we'd be welcomed as heroes down the main street, and they would have a free election. So let's take a look at what that would have meant. Iraq at the time was 20% Sunni and 80% Shiite. And the Sunnis were controlling the Shiites, and they were doing it brutally, to the point where the Shiite brothers in Iran they fought a war with them. They had over 1 million casualties in that war, where they were trying to get the Sunnis out, this brutal minority. Okay, fine. So if we go in, we take out the Sunni minority, we take out Saddam Hussein, we win the war, we march in Syria, they have a free election with 80% Shiites, who's going to win? The Shiites are going to take over. Well, what's the first thing they're going to do? They're going to reunite with their brothers in Iran, and we're going to get an Iran-Iraq superstate. Now, that was the best case. It didn't work out anywhere near as well. And now we've got the same thing happening. We've got a Jihad over in Tehran now, over in Baghdad, all the time, hugging and kissing. We've got now, it's been known that Iraq has another potential for 6 or 8 million barrels of oil a day. They've been making arrangements with everybody else other than us to exploit that oil. And we're going to be facing an Iran-Iraq superstate with nuclear weapons in the very short period of time, all based on a very poorly thought out strategy.
Well, I strongly oppose the invasion of Iraq. It's kind of ancient history now, and I support our withdrawal from Iraq as rapidly as possible and as sensibly as possible. I strongly oppose the increase of our troop levels in Afghanistan by President Obama to 100,000 troops. I thought it was exactly the opposite thing that we should be doing. Our national interests in Afghanistan is to prevent the resurgence of Al-Qaeda there and the training of terrorists that could attack us at home, which is what happened in 9/11. That's our only real national interest in Afghanistan. And we could meet the national interest with much fewer troop levels using surveillance planes and special operations forces. In my opinion, we should pull out of the rural areas of Afghanistan, provide security where needed in urban areas, and institute a program where we purchase every poppy that Afghani farmers can grow. We have a great need for poppies in the United States for making opiate painkillers. At the moment, we buy our poppies from China. Why don't we buy them from Afghanistan instead? It will take away, as Warren said earlier, the primary source of funding for the Taliban, which is the heroin trade. It would greatly reduce heroin on the market. It would provide an economy for Afghani farmers, because right now they get very little money from the Taliban. We could buy their crops from them at a reasonable rate. It would cost about $100 million a year to do this. We're spending $100 billion a year in Afghanistan. So it makes sense in every way. And then we will build a relationship with the farmers in Afghanistan, a peaceful relationship, and we could maybe induce them to grow other crops and help them rebuild their country. So I think we're pursuing a path in Afghanistan that is a no-win situation. No one has ever won in Afghanistan, not Great Britain, not Russia, and it's hard to imagine what winning is there.
Thank you. Moving on to question 3. U.S. District Court Judge Joseph L. Taros recently ruled that the 1996 Federal Defense of Marriage Act is unconstitutional. Currently, this decision only applies to Massachusetts. As senator, would you support repealing DOMA so that Connecticut same-sex couples may qualify for federal benefits and would no longer be penalized when filing federal income tax returns? Mr. Mertz.
I would absolutely favor repealing DOMA. I strongly support gay rights, and I support same-sex marriage. And a very good reason to do that is that civil unions do not provide the same legal rights as marriage does. I have had gay friends who had civil unions where one of the partners ended up in the hospital, and their partner wasn't able to get into the hospital to see them because civil unions do not provide the same legal support that marriage does. So I support same-sex marriage and the repeal of DOMA.
Thank you. Mr. Mosley?
I fully support gay rights and same-sex marriage repeal under the current context. However, I go a step further. I think that the role of government is, I think marriage should be left to churches. It should be a religious ceremony. The government should do only civil unions without discrimination to anyone and carrying full legal rights. But the actual marriages themselves should be left to religious institutions.
May I remind each question, or each candidate has 5 options to respond or to extend on the question throughout the remainder of this debate. Question number 4. Dick Blumenthal criticized Linda McMahon as being a proponent for lowering the minimum wage. Do you feel the current minimum wage helps the working class, or does it penalize those seeking work by setting a higher barrier to employment? What do you feel is the best way to support the working and middle class in today's economy? Mr. Mosler.
First, let me say my entire campaign is geared to this issue. So if I have any extra time, I'll take it. there's no evidence that shows the minimum wage costs employment. There's no statistical evidence I've ever seen anyway. I've been watching it for a long time. Jobs employment since the last 15 years has been my life's work, so to speak. And however, I go a step further again. And, in reverse order, my first proposal is for a full payroll tax holiday, which will help people working for a living by having the government stop taking this FICA taxes out of their paycheck. Again, the average family will see their take-home pay go up by over $600 a month. And this is for everyone working for a living. No, it's certainly fair. It's not being given for nothing, and it's not the government giving anyone anything. My second proposal is for a revenue sharing arrangement of $5 per capita to all the states. Connecticut, under this arrangement, would get $1.75 billion approximately, and that would go a long way towards sustaining our social services and state budgets and other essential services. My third proposal to address this question is critical. It doesn't cost all that much money, but it's critical, and that is an $8 an hour federally funded job for anyone willing and able to work. This offers unemployed a transition job to help the transition from unemployment to private sector insurance. The reason it's critical is private sector employers do not like to hire the unemployed. They'd much rather hire somebody who's already been working. And I wrote a paper on this in 1996 called Full Employment and Price Stability. It was picked up by the government of Argentina and implemented in 2001. Over 1 million people transitioned who had never had a job in the private sector or the public sector from this transition job to the private sector. And currently, India is doing it. They've got 52 million people in this program called the Rural Poor. We can do it here too.
To address the minimum wage, I support the minimum wage. I mentioned that I grew up on a farm. I was the foreman of our harvest crew when I was 12 years old. We worked 70 hours a week in 100-degree weather. And I was supervising migrant farm workers from Mexico. I hope we'll get to talk about immigration later. And my father was a generous man, and he paid us a decent wage, which at the time, the minimum wage was $3.25 an hour. But there were farmers who didn't do that, who hired illegal workers and didn't pay the minimum wage. So the minimum wage has not gone up commensurate with inflation at all, by any stretch of the imagination. So not only do I support the current minimum wage, but I think we should tie it to inflation and have annual increases in the minimum wage tied to inflation. In regards to Warren's programs, I've actually read Warren's book, and I think it's brilliant. It's called The 7 Deadly Innocent Frauds of Economic Policy. And, this may not be much of a debate, because Warren and I actually want to solve our problems. And we listen to intelligent people who have figured out what the solutions are, instead of the two major party candidates who are simply playing political football with issues and trying to build their party's power. In regards to Warren's job program, I've proposed something similar to that, mainly targeted toward urban areas, but I would support his plan to offer it to anyone. And I would add that I think it should include health insurance. So a minimum wage job for anyone willing to work with health insurance. My father took a job like that during the Depression when he couldn't find work. And we're in a really bad state now where real unemployment is about 17%. We should have something similar like that. Get people off our unemployment rolls and provide jobs for people. We'll talk more about how it could be funded later.
Thank you. Would either one of you like to expand on that question? Please.
The $8 an hour job is also a very good way to, first of all, you don't need minimum wage when you have that, because anybody can go get that job if they want to, so employers would have to pay more than that. It shows the number $8 because it's lower, a little bit lower than what the private sector pays, because we don't want this program to be hiring people out of the private sector. It's there to act almost as an employment pool for the private sector. So we would get people who are unemployed in this to help them transition to the private sector. The other thing is, what it allows us to do is to introduce benefits like health care from the bottom up. So if we introduce health care to this $8 an hour, now to compete, all businesses have to provide health care. They're not competitive. If we introduce child care, then all businesses introduce child care through market forces. This is what you call a competitive market solution to introducing benefits we'd like to see at all levels, rather than forcing them from the top down with all kinds of enforcement necessary to enforce the minimum wage stuff. To enforce the minimum wage requires inspectors and courts and everything else. If you do it with this program from the bottom up by just offering $8 anyone wants it, you eliminate all that enforcement. You eliminate needing to force healthcare on employers by doing it through this method from the bottom up. This is the ideal way to introduce the social benefits we'd like to see universally from the bottom up.
Thank you. You like to follow the rules, huh?
Yes.
All right, moving on to question number 5. Recently, Harry Reid, the majority leader in the Senate for the Democratic Party here in Connecticut, added provisions to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Taxpayer-funded provisions for abortion and amnesty for undocumented residents in the 2010 National Defense Authorization Act. If you were in the Senate when this bill was voted on, how would you have voted? Do you feel it was wise to place all these provisions in the bill at once? Mr. Mertens.
I was just talking about this at an event earlier today at Eastern Connecticut State University. What happened with Don't Ask, Don't Tell is the perfect illustration of what is wrong right now with the two-party system. Don't Ask, Don't Tell should have been repealed easily. 75% of Americans favor doing away with it. The military favors doing away with it. More than 60% of Republicans favor doing away with it. So why can't our 100 Republican and Democratic senators do away with it? This is their favorite game. They take something that should be easily passed and they attach it to a bill that's very complicated and full of what they call poison pills. So that they make sure that there aren't 50 senators that are going to be willing, or actually 60 to break a filibuster, willing to vote for it, and it doesn't pass. And then they can use it as a campaign issue in November. How about doing what's right for America and for the people of America instead of what's right for your political party? So I absolutely would repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I would propose a simple bill, which all it did was repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And then you force senators to stand up and really vote and stand up and say, I oppose what 75% of Americans support. So there are many other simple solutions to problems like this that never get fixed. Here's another quick example. There's a loophole in our tax code that gives hedge fund managers huge tax breaks. They get to count their commission income as capital gains income. No logic or rhyme or reason to this other than they're big donors to the Republican and Democratic parties. It was included about 10 years ago. Democrats, I'm going to use extra time on this, Democrats took over Congress in 2006, and one of their promises was to close this loophole. Well, they still haven't closed it. It's costing us $6 billion a year in revenue. And people who are making 10, 20, and $100 million a year are paying very low taxes on their income. Warren Buffett, a billionaire, has a $1 million offer to anyone who can disprove his claim that he pays a much lower income tax than his secretary does. This is wrong, and every senator should vote to close this loophole. A Democratic senator proposed closing the loophole, but attached it to a bill with many poison pills to make sure that it wouldn't pass, because he has constituents that donates a lot of money to his re-election campaign. That's what's wrong with our system. That's an example of what's wrong with our system.
Thank you, Mr. Mosley.
Got the question?
Would you like me to repeat it?
That was about Don't Ask.
Yes.
Uh,
I
okay.
can repeat it for you. Okay.
Yeah, look, we shouldn't have Don't Ask, Don't Tell. We have a problem with the process in Washington. It's one of the reasons why we need an independent like myself, I think, to be in here. Just for an example, I've talked to John Mertens about finance, about the payroll tax holiday. I've talked to Jerry Labriola, Republican. I've talked to Dick Blumenthal, a Democrat, and they've all listened to me and they've all adopted it as one of their plans because I'm an independent. If I was a Republican, Democrat would not speak to me. If Republicans have lost primaries this year because they agreed with the Democrats one time over the last several years. Okay, so this is the same problem that's holding up this don't ask, don't tell. And I don't know what the answer is. Yes, I go for the repeal, but if I get stuck with a bill like that, I'm going to be in the same dilemma as everyone else. Hopefully, we get some independents in there, we get some new people in there, maybe dislodge some of the committee control. We can do something to control this. As far as hedge fund compensation, I've been a hedge fund manager for a long time. And it's a lot worse than you think. And I think you're talking about carried interest, the tax on carried interest. That's a very small piece of the problem, and that doesn't have anything to do with Warren Buffett at all. It's other ways that we legally pay. Now, interestingly enough, these people were asked, at one point, people like Soros and Buffett were saying our taxes aren't high enough, they should be higher. George Bush said, well, look, if you want to pay more, just send it in. Well, none of them have. And none of them will, so we'll get to tax questions later. I just want to make a comment.
That's our 5 questions for tonight. I'd like to just spice it up because I see a lot of eyes out there. And I'd like somebody to come up here to ask a question. Something that they would like to hear, a question from either one of these U.S. Senate candidates. So does anybody out there have a question? You were first. Come on up. You can just introduce yourself. Christina.
Hi, I'm Amy Booker. I'm a student at UConn, and I actually have a question for you. I actually have 2 questions.
I would say 1 question for both candidates to answer.
Okay. I'll do that. But this one's really specific.
Okay. All right. Go ahead. Yeah. Please.
All right. You mentioned that you want to repeal the FICA tax. I want to know, how will this, prevent any more damage for our failing Social Security system?
Okay. I'm so glad you asked that question. In fact, I was hoping that would be part of the thing. And that's the reason I'm running. Okay. I know a very important fact from being inside monetary operations, and that is that federal spending is not constrained by revenues. There's no operational connection. The guy in the
Closer to the market.
okay, the person in the spending the money, he's changing numbers up in people's accounts. He doesn't even have the phone number of the guy collecting the taxes. They operate completely independently. And it's unlike the state and local governments, unlike the rest of us. The federal government's in a different position. They tax, they don't actually get it. The purpose of federal taxes is not to collect revenue, it's to regulate the economy. Now, let me give you an example. If you were to pay your taxes with a bunch of old $20 bills, you give them to the guy, these are federal taxes. You give you a receipt, thank you for paying for Afghanistan and healthcare, give it to the insurance companies. And then as soon as you leave the room, they always wait for you to leave the room, they throw it in the shredder. So the question is, how does taking your money and throwing it in the shredder pay for anything? It doesn't. If you pay by check or just deducted from your paycheck, all they do is change the number down in your bank account. There's no gold coin that's in a bucket of a pile of money that goes to the next guy. And how does the federal government spend? Where does it come from? Chairman Bernanke told us last year when he was asked where the hundreds of billions of dollars he was giving to the banks. He said, we just use the computer to mark up the numbers in their accounts. It's all data entry. So where else do we see this? You go bowling. You knock down 5 pins and your score goes from 10 to 15. Where did the bowling alley get those points? Do we think the bowling alley should have a reserve of points so that if a lot of people go bowling, they can get their score? Of course not. If you football, they take points away from you. Do they have points to give to the next one? It's the same with the federal government. Federal spending is simply using a computer, they change the numbers up in an account, and taxing, they change the numbers down. Federal borrowing, right? So I have another one.
About 15 more seconds.
Okay. Federal borrowing, debt management is nothing more than moving money from checking accounts to savings accounts to the Federal Reserve. China gets paid for the tires that they sell at the department stores, the money goes into their checking account, and they buy securities, treasury bonds, that's just a savings account. Fed moves the money from checking to savings, we pay them back by moving the money from savings to checking. Grandchildren don't write any checks, there's nothing involved. That's why I'm running to get that across. Everything you hear about the deficit, the debt, the problems, in your mind. It's not true, it's wrong, and I'm testifying under oath.
Thank you for your question. Thank you very much.
if I could add to that, as I said, I recommended Warren's book, and I learned a lot about fiscal policy from reading, and I urge people to do that. It's hard to answer a question in just a minute or two. But I would like to talk, in addition to some things related to that, which is Connecticut is in a really tough situation right now. It's facing arguably a $5 billion budget deficit next year. And states have balanced budget requirements. So Connecticut, unfortunately, can't just mark numbers in a bank account. They must actually take money from people and put it in their accounts in order to spend it. It operates differently than the federal government. And we're facing a really big problem. How does Connecticut close that gap without laying off teachers and policemen and firemen and social workers and people that will fix our roads? And the answer is that it's time for the federal government to do another round of direct aid to states. In the $800 billion stimulus package, about 25% of it was either direct aid to states or infrastructure rebuilding. We have a $2 trillion deferred maintenance problem in our infrastructure in the United States. So if I were elected, I would fight very hard for another round of direct aid to states. I did not support the rest of the 75% of the stimulus package. I thought it was terrible, bang for the buck, Warren, and I don't agree 100% on all of that. But so during a recession, when states are hit so hard, where their state revenue has gone down so much, and they're in danger of damaging the infrastructure of the state, the social and literal infrastructure of the state, in the long term, it's appropriate for the federal government to run a deficit because they can do that. They don't have a balanced budget requirement. They can actually, quote unquote, print money or change numbers in the bank account at will because they control the currency and prevent this terrible damage to us and our states. So,
Thank you very much. And we're going to, did you want to expand on that? You do have extra time, 1 minute.
So what we're saying is federal taxes are best thought of like the thermostat. They don't bring in money, they regulate the economy. So when the economy's ice cold, you want to lower them, bring it back to operating accounts. That's why we have payroll taxes. The only time you'd ever want to lower taxes is if people were spending too much money, they had too much, and it was causing an inflation problem. Then you'd want to take some money away from them.
We're going to wrap up this debate with a closing statement, 2 minutes for each candidate. And I would like Mr. Mosler to lead the closing statement. 2 minutes. Thank you.
We didn't talk a lot about it tonight, but I'm here because we're in an absolute economic emergency. It's destroying our country, it's destroying our social fabric, it's destroying our morality, it's causing crime and ruining a whole generation of students. 10 years ago, it was by accident, we had a pretty good economy. Unemployment was under 4%. We were growing rapidly. Kids getting out of graduating college were getting job offers in April and May for jobs that didn't start for 3 and 6 months later. And a good economy with a labor shortage. There's always more to do than there are to do it. When we've got the economy on, that's how it is. We didn't touch on a lot of different issues, which stay afterwards. I'll go into those for you. But the problem is that people in Washington don't understand that taxes function to regulate the economy. They think it's to bring in money. Why would the Democrats have cut $500 billion out of the Medicare budget to give to the insurance companies? That's not what Democrats do. It's because they thought the government has gone broke. The president said several times we've run out of money. And now we have to go borrow from China, leave the bill to our grandchildren. I'm running because I know for an absolute fact, under oath, that there is no such thing. They don't understand basic monetary operations. And if they did understand it, they wouldn't be like this. This isn't something I just started doing recently. I've been going around to different congressmen and senators for the last couple of years, more so recently, and starting to build a consensus on this and getting people coming back to me. And I've got other candidates in this race. Like, and I've got a book out now that people are reading. I've got a website, thousands of hits. In fact, it's become a whole new school of economics called MMT, if you see it around. It's called Modern Monetary Theory. This is what I've started, what I've been promoting. And so anyway, jobs is not something new to me. It's been my life's work. I'm running for office here to get your vote, to get in there and talk when somebody flashes at a stop sign. Anyway, you get the idea. I'm going to turn this over to Jen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I announced my candidacy in September of 2009, and I gave a speech, and people asked me, why are you running? And I said, I'm running because I'm scared, and I'm angry, and I'm worried about our future. And over the last year, I've met thousands of people, and I've interviewed people on video and listened to them. I interviewed them instead of talking at them. And I learned a lot from them. You can watch the videos on my website. And now I'm full of hope. I'm no longer scared. There are so many people out there doing amazing things to build community and to make this country better that we don't hear about. Unfortunately, none of them are our politicians, or at least very few of them. We need leaders that will inspire us to work together to solve problems and rebuild our democracy. And that's not what we see now from the two major parties. Anybody who's been in Connecticut for the last months and seen the television commercials that are on TV for the governor's race and for the US Senate race must think that all four of those candidates are terrible human beings, that they should belong in prison. No joke. If someone came from outer space and all they knew about the four candidates were the TV commercials, they would think that on Earth, we must try to find the worst people we can find for our leaders. That's wrong. We're all Americans. We have pundits out there who are teaching us that if someone disagrees with you, they're your enemy. And that's destroying our democracy. We need to work together to make this country and world better. There are a lot of really smart people out there who have figured out what we should do to solve our problems. But our politicians aren't listening. They're not even talking about the problems, let alone implementing the solutions. If you go to my website, mertens2010.com, I have 30 detailed position statements and solutions to problems. Think about voting for a third-party candidate this year. Thank you very much.
U.S. Senate debate before we move on to our next solo speaker. But first of all, I want to thank both candidates, John Mertens and Mr. Mosler, this evening for participating in an all-inclusive debate. Yes, there are 4 candidates running for U.S. Senate here in California, of which 2 of them decided, no, Connecticut, I'm sorry, California red eye, so my apologies, no excuse though. But in any case, I want to thank the 2 candidates that are here, not only from free and equal elections, but personally for standing and being here for the people. They are true outsiders that are here that want to be in office for the people. So I want to step away from free and equal and do something I have never done before. And I would like to personally, as myself, Christina Tobin, endorse both of these candidates for U.S. Senate. So, thank you very much. And you can find more of our information at freeandequal.org for all of you listening out there tonight, live stream and in the foreseeable future. Our proceeds, the nonprofit with Free and Equal, rely on you and everybody to continue pushing forward for all-inclusive debates nationwide and presidential debates and so on. So thank you very much. I'd like to wrap up the Senate debate and move on to our next speaker. So thanks again. I'd like to move on to our next, in my personal opinion, the dynamite individual from the Independent Party. His name is Tom Marsh. He actually has really set himself apart from the other 2 candidates running for governor here in Connecticut. University of Connecticut previously planned on holding a governor's debate this evening, but unfortunately they made the wrongful decision of canceling it because one candidate decided not to participate. Mr. Marsh wanted to participate, and the University of Connecticut unfortunately did not make the right decision. So Free and Equal is here today, though neither one of the other two candidates are here to debate. I would like to open up the mic to Tom Marsh, to the students out there today, to have maybe a 10 to 15-minute dialogue and question and answer between Tom Marsh. So, Tom, thank you very much for coming tonight. I appreciate it. I would like, if there's anybody, you can take the podium. If there's anybody in the audience, I want more interaction with Tom. He's running for governor here in Connecticut. If anybody has any questions on what he stands for, it would be really great if somebody came up and asked.
Very good. I'll keep my remarks fairly short, at least start waiting if
Please,
if
do your
lied.
introduction. My apologies. Yeah.
Not at all. My name is Tom Marsh. I'm the independent party candidate for governor. I currently serve as the first selectman or mayor of the town of Chester. And my website is marsh2010.com. It can give you pretty detailed positions on a wide range of topics. As was mentioned, I was contacted back in August to participate in a debate tonight for gubernatorial candidates. UConn had sponsored a forum back in probably June sometime where the Republican and Democratic candidates were offered an opportunity to speak at the law school. And at that time I was running as a Republican. This was an event that had been in the works for quite some time. I was notified about a month ago that Mr. Foley refused to participate. And because Mr. Foley refused to participate, the event was going to be canceled. And it wasn't unique to UConn. I had been invited to 11 debates, none of the major ones but of those 11, Mr. Foley chose not to participate in this, nor in 3 of the League of Women Voters debates, and those events were canceled. And my problem with that is not so much with the institutions that canceled, although I wish they hadn't, but there's no more important thing a candidate can do than to stand up and espouse their beliefs and be challenged by their opponents in front of the electorate. And if you're afraid to do that, or you don't feel that you do it well, how are you going to push your agenda and advocate for your positions once elected? I think it's a mandatory test for political office. It is part of politics. And I think it speaks very poorly when campaign strategy starts stepping in between the purpose of the electorate and the purpose of a campaign. The purpose of a campaign is not to see how badly you can paint your opponent, it's to how well you can promote your ideas. And unfortunately, we're seeing that lost. And that kind of comes around to why I got involved in the first place. Connecticut and New England really offer a unique opportunity to get involved in government because we have so much small government. Every town has 169 towns, have mayors, have boards of finance, have planning and zoning commissions, boards of education that require, in most cases, volunteer involvement. If you don't step forward, there is no governance. It really is your responsibility, regardless of your age, as long as you're 18, to step up and be involved, and you are a product of your government. If you choose not to be involved, then you must choose also not to complain. From that basis of 169 towns, they're all incubators, a lot of different ideas can come forward. And when I looked at the issues I was facing as a mayor, and frankly, I got elected almost by mistake. I was running as a Republican in a town that only had 25% Republican administration. I won by 30 votes, and that was 5 years ago. And then I went from that to start addressing the problems of our community, a failed sewer system, a failed bridge, a failed budget. And I had to deal with a lot of government, but I had no formal governmental experience. And I found that no matter what agency I went to, it functioned poorly. There was no consideration given to quality or value of service, to spending our tax dollars well. And when Governor Rell chose not to run, again, I felt I'm not doing this because I want the job. It's not, frankly, all that great a job. You can make a lot more money on other things without nearly as much consternation. But we have a responsibility as citizens involved in your governance. And although there were 13, I believe, candidates running for governor, I didn't hear anybody advocating for the value of local government and the value of accountability. So my intention was to bring that message to the debate. Unfortunately, in the process in Connecticut, you have to be a Republican or a Democrat to get into the process to choose your candidates. So as a Republican, I got into the process. I went to the Republican town committees. I tried to garner support, but But if you didn't hold that hard right line, that is what those involved in the town committees and the delegates to the conventions wanted to hear, they didn't want to hear you. And the Democrats were the same way. It was the party ideology. So in essence, what happened is a very, very small group of people determined the ideologies of our candidates. 42% of us are unaffiliated, unable to even participate in the primary process. And what we saw this past August were two candidates that came forward. One, the Republican, had 50,000 votes. The Democrat had 100,000 votes. And one party has about twice the vote as the other. That's 150,000 people that the so-called major parties put in place to solve the problems of governance, yet the ideas that they had spoke only to their ideologies, not their issues. I was very much motivated by the independent party and their commitment to good governance. One thing, if you don't know John, you don't know Warren, who just spoke, they're very, very bright men. I mean, Warren is an internationally recognized financier and economist. I mean, just the fact that you got to hear him speak tonight, I can take him up on it, talk to him later, he's brilliant. And John is a PhD from Stanford. And I mean, gosh, he talks about things I couldn't possibly understand. But those are the qualities that you get when you get away from the politics and you start getting to the people. You get committed people with good ideas. Not to say everybody's going to be right all the time, but you get genuine attempts at solutions. And I think we're in a dynamic time. And I think it's people in your age that are going to have to push it. People aren't running to another party. They're running from the current system. And that can be hard because it's a void. It's a void that doesn't have a particular direction, but it's a direction that you can set. But hopefully what comes from that is a robust discussion of ideas and better people involved in government. And maybe it takes us going to the point where we have $50 million spent by a wrestling maven and or public funding for, the candidate says, oh my gosh, the legislature says we got to give our guy more money or else we can't compete. And we need to see the frustration that's developing. And believe me, I've been in 3 forums just this week with the other 2 fellas, and those that are participating are just so dissatisfied with the money that has been spent and absolutely no understanding of really what either of my opponents are standing for. That's a disservice to all of us, and we shouldn't accept that. So get engaged, get involved, listen to minor parties, listen to the ideas they say, because they only have their message. Earlier today, I was interviewed. I was interviewed by Channel 3 today. I was on the news tonight. Everybody's very anxious to talk to me now that all the debates that have gone by and they excluded me and they didn't want to have to face that. So now that it's over, I'm the cute little guy over here that's trying really hard. But what I pointed out is I've spent about $10,000. Maybe that's going to come to 25 cents or 50 cents a vote. My opponents are spending probably $15 to $18 a vote. So there is no more cost-effective way to get the message out than to stand on your principles. You do need a little money to get it home so that you can project yourself. But if you just put your ideas out there, that is the most cost-effective way to get support. And I hope at least that message comes through, as well as the message to get involved. That while Warren and John may be daunting figures and levels of intelligence that at least I don't get to, but I can tell you firsthand, the other candidates, nobody should have a concern that they don't fit the bill to be a public official. The bar is fairly low. So if we can get past the perceptions and get down to the issues, I think we really have an opportunity to take this situation and turn it in, make it the turning point for better governance. So I think that's about all I need to say. I can solve the state's problems in about 15 minutes, but that's not something that we need to talk about here. So if you have interest in the state debates, you can either ask questions or visit my website, march2010.com. Thank you. Any questions?
Got one.
Mr.
Come on up.
Hello, my name is Jason Ortiz, and my question is, for the first time in history, students are paying a higher percentage of tuition than any other source of income. What would you do to help students weather the burden of tuition costs?
I'll start with a premise of our situation and then Connecticut is facing, I'll put it this way, the number you hear a lot is $3.5 billion deficit. It's not $3.5 billion. It's $3.5 billion because we don't follow accounting rules so that they can kind of make the numbers up. We have $3.5 billion to start. If we follow accounting principles and had a true representation, like if the state were a town or a business, that number would be $5.5 billion. And in addition to that, we are $1 billion underfunded in our unemployment insurance. So the state is facing a short-term deficit of $6.5 billion. Our whole budget's only $19 billion. And if you throw in unfunded post-employment benefits, the pensions and medical care that we promised those who are retired from employment, we're up over $50 billion. And in speaking with the president of the Connecticut CPAs Association, she implied that if the state sold every asset it had to cover its liabilities, we would still be $10 billion short. So we're effectively bankrupt. So it would be disingenuous on my part to offer you any kind of short-term hope that there's going to be reductions in tuitions. That said, I think if we use this short-term case to right the ship doing government better, we can have a robust discussion on where the priority of state governance and state spending are. And I think you can make a credible argument that if we want to have an educated workforce and we want to keep our young people in Connecticut, that we should make it as cost-effective as possible for them to stay here and be educated. It may be a slightly different model, maybe putting more emphasis on some of our community college systems. I kind of look at that as the farm team to get you up to a place like UConn. But I think that there's a lot of value to that. But I've gone, in the last 2 weeks, we've gone to municipal leaders, and my opponents have said municipalities don't have to worry about getting their aid cut. I've had an education forum, and my opponent said we can't touch education. I've heard them say that state employees don't have to worry. And everybody's got to worry. I mean, I worry. I own my own business. My income's off about 60%. I worry. Everybody here is worried about getting a job. Everybody out there who has a job is worried about keeping it. So why are state employees somehow not have to worry? And it's disingenuous in these times to offer that false hope. So I think that it's a legitimate position to say we need to keep the tuition as affordable as possible. But I think on the other side, if we turn the economy around and you walked out the door and were making $100 grand a year, you wouldn't be that concerned about the payment you have to make. And I'll tell you right now, my eldest is 24, is looking at she has about $80,000, and she's making hours as a certified teacher in a private school. She's living at home, where she really would, I'm sure, rather not spending the money that she wishes she had. The student loans are burdening her, but what the burden is the job market. We need to turn the economy around.
Any other questions?
See, I could just say, you way in the back. I'll turn around and look, and there's no one. But, well, I appreciate your interest, and do go out and get involved. It's important. Thank you.
And naturally, I'd like to personally endorse you for governor here in Connecticut
Welcome.
as well. So I want to end on a positive note, just briefly what Free and Equal is about. All-inclusive debates is one of many different factors. We are going to have a significant upgrade in our website in the upcoming days, within a week, of which we will have caucuses activated nationwide. We are working through universities, not only here at University of Connecticut. I will be flying to a university in Illinois tomorrow, next week in California, to moderate governor and U.S. Senate debates nationwide. We are activating the student chapters from Students for Liberty to Students for Sensible Drug Policy nationwide to get these students involved in all-inclusive debates. We recently held a rally in Kentucky where we had 25 candidates across the political spectrum, from Greens to Democrats to Republicans, all outsiders that came in front of the Capitol and united for free and equal elections. It's truly historical. So what we're going to do is get student groups involved like yourself, get incumbents knocked out of office. Our portal will teach you how to run for office. It will teach you what you need to do to gather signatures, what you need to do to lobby, to make it easier to get on the ballot, to have the caucuses activate all-inclusive debates, not only for governor and U.S. Senate, for local levels as well, and then to implement true electoral reform initiatives like proportional representation, which 81 countries use. So these are the kind of things. Please go to freeandequal.org, andequal.org, and research a little bit more about what we're about, and we'll be back here again at University of Connecticut, definitely in the future. So thank you again for your time tonight. Thanks for your help. You hung in there. Thanks so much for your help. I should grab some flyers for everybody too.
Good job, timekeeping.